says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a police! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell Killer!
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020. Joining me for our standards at the very least, an exceptionally brief episode is my good mate Sixties, big fella. It's a very short run sheet this week, or this episode in particular. We've got some fun things to talk about for the Jersey Flegg and our NRL tips, but how you doing in the meantime?
Mate, I'm a little bit warmer than when we recorded last night. It was absolutely freezing. And, this will go out to all of the listeners on Friday. So we're keeping the content coming your way on TCT. And in that regard, a bit of a shout out to our sponsors, Big Swing Golf Northmead and Star Partners Real Estate Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta, without whom we would not be able to bring you all of this content on the Cumberland Throw. So thank you to our partners there.
Yes, sir. So let's jump right into the Jersey Flegg this week. 60s, the lone Parramatta team in action, the NRL and the New South Wales Cup on a bye each. So with the Jersey Flegg, they're hosting the 11th place West Tigers. The Eels occupy 9th place currently on the ladder. Now, is it a top 6, top 5, or top 8 in the Flegg? Is it top 8 still?
I'm pretty sure it's top 5. It was top 5 last year. I don't imagine it's changed anything because it's a 12-team competition.
Yeah, exactly.
Memory. So when they have those top 5 New South Wales Cup and Jersey Flegg competitions, it allows them to finish their finals 1 week before the NRL, and then that means that the Queensland and New South Wales winners at that cup level are able to play off in the national championship final and grand final day.
Of course, that means that the Eels need to get on their bike. Like I said, they occupy 9th position on the ladder this week with 6 wins from their 15 outings. They're chasing, in terms of the top 5, the Melbourne Storm, who are on 8 wins from 14 games. So they've got a game to play in relation to the Parramatta Eels. I think all teams should have even buys in this competition. I'm not sure about that, though. But yeah, this week they take on the second last placed West Tigers. 4 wins from 14 outings for them. Negative 98 for and against. Parramatta not sitting pretty in that regard. Negative 44 and against. But they have broken their recent slump with a nice win over the Cronulla Sharks. Looking at these two teams line up 60s, the game's taking place on Saturday out at Ringrose Park, Wenty, one of our old stomping grounds, 4 o'clock p.m. kickoff. Be interested to see if the canteen is open for the old chip rolls there, but regardless, it's always good to get to one of our old stomping grounds there. And the Eels, they got a fair bit of continuity this week. I think Jock Brazel's out, but he was also a bit of a surprise inclusion last week too, given he's been playing a lot of New South Wales Cup. But they do get back Lockie Blackburn and Nicholas Lenard. Sorry, Nick. But we start at fullback for the Eels with Te Horanui Apanui Tweedle or Apa Tweedle. On the wings, Matthew Komalafi and Taroa Williams. In the centres, Richard Penasini and Lockie Blackburn. The halves continues that all SG Ball spine theme. Joshua Lynn at 5'8", Ethan Sanders at halfback. In the front row, it's Noah Reid and Brock Parker as the bookends. Matty Arthur is the dummy half. On the edges, Charlie Geimer, Will Latu and Captain Nick Lenars. On the interchange, Araz Namva, Sam Tuavati, Max Tupou and Lance Lima. Paddy Spence is the 18th man or replacement player. Just looking at this West Tigers team, 60s, trying to see if there's any of those SG Ball players that we sort of took on going back a couple of months now. Trey Penny, I believe, was part of that team, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be mistaken. Let me just quickly check our run through to the finals. It was in the Magpie squad, wasn't it? Yeah. No, so Trey Penny didn't play that game. I'm making things up. Looks like they haven't got too many players in the back line here. Josh Feldy, we do know 60s. He's from Manly, recently from Manly to the Tigers. But yeah, it looks like they haven't got too many players in the back line that are playing up from there. What about in the forwards? Again, I'm not seeing too many crossovers here.
I've got a funny feeling thinking back to that being a young West's SG Ball.
It was, but we saw what's his name, De Silva, being accelerated very aggressively through the ranks. So I thought they might have had a few more in there. On the interchange, Kit Li'i is their captain from that SG Ball squad. But yeah, it looks like they haven't been too aggressive with the promotion of these players. So
Yeah, as I said, that may well be an age factor with that.
they could also probably be in Cup too, I suppose. So I could be overlooking that as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, 60s on the back of that 22-12 win against the Cronulla Sharks. It was a away trip to PointsBet Stadium. This is a game the Eels really need to have if they're going to make a charge towards the postseason.
Yeah, and look, you mentioned before that one of the teams that we have to catch up is the Melbourne Storm. That was probably one of those unfortunate losses that they had where the Eels led till there was about 2 or 3 minutes left in the game. And there ended up being a turnover of possession in the Eels quarter, and then the Storm were able to score with just those couple of minutes left on the clock, and that basically meant that I guess it's that classic case of snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, and it was. And once you're talking about a team that you're trying to catch, getting a jump on you by 2 points, you can see the difference where if you take 2 points off them, add 2 points to us, that's a 4-pointer, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You know, they should be that much closer. But the past is the past. All that the Eels can do is take care of what they've got in front of them at the moment, which at the moment is that clash against the West Tigers, a clash that certainly according to the table positions and also form is one that's very winnable for the Parramatta Eels. So we'll be out there on Saturday afternoon covering that with live blog for people who can't get out there themselves, although I've had a few messages of people that because Parramatta aren't playing in the NRL, they're planning to go out and get a bit of football, Parramatta Eels football on Saturday afternoon. So we might see a few people out there. If you see us there, come up and say g'day. We're always happy to catch up with fellow Eels supporters at lower grade games. Mate, yeah, now just looking at why. What's I imagine that you're also backing an Eels win in this.
Mm-hmm.
What gives you confidence about the Eels being able to get the job done against the Tigers?
I mean, the first thing that really comes to mind is the continuity of that playmaking core. They've been without Ethan Sanders for just about a month, or maybe a tick over a month.
Yeah,
he slots back in, and suddenly the team is whirring nicely. Matty Arthur's been entrusted with playing that starting dummy half role and hasn't looked out of sorts despite being young in this grade. Upper Tweedle's back. He's sort of bounced between 5'8" and fullback in the meantime with the injuries elsewhere in this team, and has sort of held the fort down, but he's back at fullback where he prefers to play and looking real good. So when you've got those playmakers, and obviously Joshua Wynn's in there too, and he's been in and out of the team with injury as well. So you got them all back in there. They've got that full NRL preseason, SG Ball preseason, SG Ball premiership season of experience and combinations together. It's no shock that when they're all fit and healthy on the park at the same time, that the team looks, an order of magnitude better. So I really like that. Also like the back line getting fit and healthy. Richard Penasini, Lockie Blackburn, Terrell Williams, Matty Komalafi, big athletic back line there. And just in the forwards too. Brock Parker's back. That is a huge in. Now that he's back and settled after that was an MCL 60s. He did his knee earlier in the season. He's now back and looking to be in good form. Charlie Geimer's now healthy. He's doing well on that right edge. So they've got a lot of really strong building blocks in this team. And the other factor too is that because of the New South Wales Cup bye, they could have even more firepower available. So I don't know if it's going to be a game day inclusion, but they've got the likes of Jonte Jr., Bethan Meza, and Jock Brazel, if he is healthy, to call upon, and also Jacob Davies too, but I'm not sure. He might have been injured when he played against the Canterbury Bulldogs a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, that is an interesting point. I don't rule out late inclusions in this team. We haven't had any inside mail in any way about that, but as you mentioned, there are players who have been features in this particular team. They've gone up to New South Wales Cup. The Cup's got a bye this weekend. Could there be late changes? Yeah, I'm not ruling it out. They have had Nick Lenars come back from New South Wales Cup to the lock and captaincy role with this team. That's also, I think, a big inclusion because, as we know, he brings a lot of the energy to the team, and that's both in attack and defence.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's one of those blokes that he's a real effort player, and doesn't shy away from the physicality of the contest at all, does he? So, and he's got that capacity that if the dummy half needs a break, he can slot from lock into the dummy half role. So keep an eye on him. The fella that really impressed me outside of the spine last week in the Jersey Flegg win over the Sharks was Charlie Geimer. I thought he was outstanding on the edge last week and asked lots of questions. He's alternated this season between the edge and lock roles, and I guess that one of the things that he was always going to be having to deal with as he came into a change of position, moving from the centre role into the pack, was that additional workload. And I think he's done quite well in that this year. He had a very good season in SG ball, and now that he's getting his run in Jersey Flegg, looks like he's going to continue that good form into the higher grade. So keep your eye on him. Richard Penasini's also had a very good transition from SG ball into Jersey Flegg, and he's also one of the younger players as well, having been in the Harold Matts team last year. So you earlier you mentioned Matty Arthur as being a young inclusion, and yeah, that's also the case for Richie Penasini.
And disappointingly, no Saxon Pryke, but you got to think that injury or suspension's playing a factor there because he's been very good into Jersey Flegg this year. So hopefully, if he is injured, he gets to make a speedy recovery. And if he is suspended, it's for nothing too long term. But yeah, I mean, this is probably the best team on paper they've been able to field for a while. Obviously, going back to last week where they got that win too. So now it's just about building and sort of really tapping into that continuity of the roster and the sort of form that you can build because of it. And taking on the West Tigers, who are a couple wins worse off than the Eels, you got to take care of business this week.
That's right. So, look, I honestly think that they can get the job done. And whilst you don't want them to be thinking about the scoreboard, at the end of the day, I think they will have made some inroads into taking some steps towards fixing up that points differential, which, as you said, sits around 40 points right at the moment. That might end up being about, as far as I'm concerned, that might halve this week. I'm going to tip a 20-point victory to the Eels.
That wouldn't be what the coaches said as a baseline, because obviously you just want to work towards a win. But if you're looking at it a little bit more greedily as a fan and not a coach, I would say a 20-point win, 60s would be a nice sort of par mark here, or a plus mark for the Eels to start building towards a push for the finals. So, yeah, I'm going to slide them in around about that 18 to 20-point margin of victory as what they need to get done this weekend.
And, mate, that is the only grade that we're previewing this week, which then gives us a bit of time to offer our NRL tips.
Yeah, let's have a quick dive through the week that will be for the NRL, which is round 18, and obviously it starts. They will have their recording up tomorrow, but it'll start on the Thursday night with the Shire/Dragons derby, with the 4th place Sharks hosting the 17th place Dragons. 7:50 p.m. kickoff out at PointsBet Stadium, 60s. Just a quick look at the key ins and outs here for the two teams. It looks like the Sharks are pretty much per program from last week. Braden Trindle is part of the extended roster, but aside from that, they're looking pretty fit and healthy. For the Dragons, they've got a couple of big outs there. Jack Bird, Moses Suli, Zane Musgrove out, income Mbai, Tautau Monga, and then who's replacing? Is it Couchman? Yeah, Toby Couchman's on the interchange there. So, got plenty of time for Ryan Carr 60s, and he's honestly done a pretty good job at the Dragons, all things considering, but it's a tough assignment this week.
Mate, it is a very tough assignment, and yes, we do have a high opinion of Ryan Carr. I've said before during his tenure at Parramatta as a lower grade coach that I believed he was an NRL coach in waiting. I've seen nothing in his time as a caretaker at St George to have me change my opinion. In fact, if anything, it's only strengthened my opinion. I think he has a strong leadership ethic. The only problem is he's got a team where the on-field captain has been agitating to leave.
It's a pretty rough deal hand he's been dealt here. So he took over, against was it the Roosters?
I think he's 1-2, lost 3, something like that, hasn't it?
That's
5 games.
Yeah, honestly, a pretty solid record, all things considering. So yeah, he's lost Dragons, beat the Rabbitohs, lost, and the Warriors was a bit of a thumping, but narrowly lost the Panthers. Got beaten by the Dolphins, but beat the Roosters and South Sydney. So yeah, far from a terrible start to his tenure, all things considering what the Dragons are as a club on and off the field at the moment.
However, there's the however.
There was that sort of conjunction right there. The however is a pretty brutal and intense one this week.
Yeah, they won't get the job done against the Sharks. The Dragons, the Ben Hunt situation has not been resolved.
No,
if it'd be festering there. It's obvious that he doesn't want to be at the club. His teammates have to play alongside and listen to a captain that doesn't want to be there. The supporters are faced with the team being led by someone who doesn't want to play in the Red V anymore. It's a recipe for a thumping. And I think the Sharks will deliver a thumping to them this week. I think it's going to be 20 points or more.
The Sharks, alongside the Eels, have been one of the 2 premier attacking outfits this year, and you could easily see them piling on 30, 40, 50 plus in this one. I know that these derby games generally are played fairly closely, but yeah, there is a whole equation of disaster here for the Dragons. They are just lurching from issue to issue, and like you said, that situation surrounding their captain and highest paid player in Ben Hunt, you can't imagine it's good for morale. So yeah, tipping the Sharks and the Sharks by 13 plus at the line, but a very healthy 13 plus.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the first of 2 Friday night games where you've got the real breakout stars of this season. I mean, the Dolphins obviously are the feel-good story in one way, but the New Zealand Warriors under their new coach, Webster, who was the less fancy of the 2 Penrith assistant coaches, have been nothing short of seriously impressive this year. They're hosting the Rabbitohs, who have been on a big skid ever since we took them to the cleaners. And the Warriors actually enter as healthy favourites in this game. So they're in 5th place versus the Rabbitohs 8th place. Murata Niokore, one of our favourite players, he is out. The man has got a bad rap with the judiciary, and I honestly feel like Murata gets graded probably like one step above where he should be getting graded these days. He's a marked man, and unfortunately that means he sits out a lot of games. But he is out, so that means he's gone from the back row. In comes Jackson Ford, I believe, into the starting team there, and Josh Curran's on the other edge. For the Bunnies, they've got Jacob Host and Jed Cartwright out, and you've got Blake Taff at fullback. Otherwise, the backline looks pretty good. Richie Kenner's not the first choice winger, I don't think, but they've got, what else is happening there? They've got their first choice spine, it looks like, yep. So you got, outside of Taff, but you've got Walker, Ilias, and Cook. Forward pack looks very good with Totola, Sele, Kaloa-Matangi, and Cam Murray in there. Very good pack right there. For the Warriors, though, they've just been, it's none of it's been the star factor 60s, but it's been real honest work across the park. Dallin Watine-Zelezniak has been enjoying a very good season, but Shans Nickel-Clockstar, he is probably the player that's, Dylan Edwards probably gets the sort of comparisons too, but I feel like Shans Nickel-Clockstar is probably the player I would say is most analogous to Quinton Gufferson. Just a huge effort guy, makes some tremendous defensive plays, and is all about heart and hustle. They've been really fun to watch. Sean Johnson's been excellent. Adam Fanua-Blake's back in his best form. They're playing a really good brand of football. Probably not too dissimilar to what the Eels did in their sort of formative years under Brad Arthur.
Yeah. I think, as you said there, outside of what was surrounding the Dolphins at the start of the year in terms of the feel-good story around the Dolphins, there'd be people that wouldn't be disappointed that the Warriors are getting to enjoy a little bit of success this season, given the tribulations that they've been through with COVID and having to relocate to Australia for a number of seasons, and just being able to be back home and playing matches in front of home crowds. They've really found their mojo. The confidence with which they're playing is what stands out to me. Like, they've got a genuine self-belief, I think, not just in themselves, but in the systems that have been introduced there. They look a different team. There is nothing about the way they play, in my opinion, that you could relate as classic Warriors football.
Mm-hmm.
That what is regarded as classic Warriors football is just basically throwing caution to the wind.
Yeah, flamboyant, reckless, aggressive. It's wonderful when it comes off, but it is lower percentage football. Whereas here under Webster, they've installed those systems that aren't, boring, by the numbers football, but just good, honest, sort of rugby league.
Well, they're producing consistent standards this year, and that's probably the difference. What supporters can expect from the Warriors is that they're going to put themselves in every contest. You just couldn't say that before. Like, you knew you might get one of those out of the box games against the Warriors when you took them on at any time in the past. What you've know this year, if you're a team taking on the Warriors, is they're turning up to play, and that's the difference this year. The Rabbitohs are an interesting case in point. At the start of the season, I felt like I was again having to eat humble pie, because I think for the second year in a row, I tipped the Rabbitohs to falter this season. I thought they were going to falter last season with the change of coach, the loss of Adam Reynolds. I think there was one or two other players that they lost as well. Off the top of my head, I can't recall who it was, but they just, to me, I just thought, no, then they're just not going to be up to the same standards as years gone by. This year, it's taken a little while for it to happen, but they're certainly one of the teams that you could say are in a mid-season slump. Now, whether this is indicative of how they're going to play throughout the back half of the season, I'm not too sure. But it's no coincidence that they've got Latrell Mitchell out of the team at the moment. So he's obviously just a big factor in what they're able to produce. But, earlier this season, that their right side was creating a lot of havoc, and that made it hard for teams to adjust to them, because they always had that threat on the left, but were hitting their right and having great success. And I just wonder whether teams just hadn't prepared well enough for their alternate attack. It seems like teams are handling them reasonably easy at the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting. They did put on a couple of nice plays against Parramatta, in particular that short side play that led to their second try, I think it was, just before half time. But on the whole, they just feel a lot less threatening. We played them with Latrell, so it wasn't like they were undermanned at the time. So maybe after years, the league's finally caught up a little bit to their prolific attacking structures. I don't know. Maybe that there's guys playing a bit banged up. Who knows? But right now, the Rabbitohs are seriously faltering, and it's going to be very hard to tip them for this particular game. I think the Warriors deserve their favoritism, and I could see the Warriors are really building towards a solid win here.
Yeah, well, with the Rabbitohs, we put on quite a score against them. We've had after that, the Dragons put on over 30 points against them, and in their last match, the Cowboys thumped them 31-6. So what's that? 3 weeks in a row of 30 plus points. This is from a team who were rated highly for their defence as much as originally their left side attack. They're just leaking.
Yep.
And, that's probably going to be that to me is one of the things that they have to get under control and quick smart. Now, Latrell Mitchell is not going to fix their defensive issues. Not one bit. That's an attitudinal problem.
Yeah.
That's going on there. So, yeah, what they do here. Let's get to it. I'm going to tip the Warriors in this game. It's a home game. They've got the form. The Rabbitohs have be dropping in confidence. They're certainly dropping in form. So I'm gonna tip the Warriors to win 12-13 plus.
Yeah, I mean, recent form would point towards the Rabbitohs, being a fair chance of conceding that 30-plus sort of points defensively. I will go for a Warriors win, probably in somewhere between like 8 to 12 points. I think they'll get a good, solid win here. Maybe a late try or two might shorten that margin into my range for the Bunnies. But yeah, at home, the Warriors are very hard to tip against right now.
Yeah, well, I think where that game was pretty easy, the next game, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, on paper, the game of the round, I know there is the Brisbane Derby and whatnot ahead, but this is, 3v1 on the ladder, 8 o'clock p.m. out at Marvel Stadium, Melbourne. Marvel because the World Cup, right? Is it the Women's World Cup for soccer?
Yeah.
Is that what's kicking everyone out of the Rugby League Stadium? So that begins now with the Melbourne Storm moving over to Marvel. They're taking on the Penrith Panthers. Both teams loaded up with some reinforcements this week. They were resting their origin stars last week, so in comes Cam Munster for the Storm alongside a couple other players in Tom Eisenhuhr and Tui Kamikamifa. For the Panthers, though, Brian To'o, Isaiah Yeo, Jerome Luai, Liam Martin, Stephen Crichton, all in. Obviously some seriously heavy hitters in that bunch of names there. So looking at these two teams, I mean, Nick Meaney's been exceptional fullback. I liked when they picked him up in the first place, but Melbourne seem to have, sort of just churn out high-quality fullbacks these days, regardless of who's there. Will Warbrick has been excellent on the wing, and he's probably one of the leading. He is eligible for Rookie of the Year, right? Coming across from Rugby Union.
Yes.
So he'll be alongside Katoa, Brendan Hands, and there's someone else I'm missing here.
Khan Pereira. What about
Khan Pereira, and then Jareem Buller. That's probably the pack of leading Rookie of the Year candidates right now. But Warbrick, he's been very good on that right flank for the Melbourne Storm. Xavier Coates had an outstanding game at Origin. We've always got a high opinion of him. So, I mean, that Melbourne backline's excellent. Their forward pack's solid right now. I mean, Nelson Sofa Solomona, they're playing on the edges, and he's doing a good job. So that's a big mismatch there for the ball in hand. Penrith, though, one of the most well-drilled and well-talented rosters in the game. Going to be hard. I mean, this is a hard one to tip, but man, it's hard to tip against the Panthers. They're just outside here at the betting line, but no Cleary is the big, sort of mark against them. But Jack Hogg has been pretty good. They get Jerome Luai back this week. I don't know, 60s. This is a hard game to tip.
Yeah, I'm going to tip the Storm by virtue of the fact that this is, inverted commas, a home game. I mean, it's not really a home game for them in terms of the venue, but in terms of the city, it's a home game for them. Cleary is and remains a big out for the Panthers. It was very entertaining to see that reaction after the game. Christian Welsh, when he didn't realise that the microphone was live and he was in a bit of stunned disbelief about the Knights losing to the Panthers when the Panthers rested all those players. I mean, it was good to see that interest and amazement that a player would have on the result of another match, because not all rugby league players are worried about what's going on with the rest of the comp. They can be a little bit insular with their following of other matches or viewing of other matches. But yeah, so that was interesting, his response to how the Knights went. And you know what? I think that loss to the Panthers was more of an indictment against the Knights than it was a big tick for what the Panthers were able to do without their players. And for that reason, I am going to tip the Storm. The absence of Nathan Cleary and the fact that I think that the Panthers, their look, that Panther ball, it hasn't worked at Origin level. I know at Premiership level, it's very, very successful, but I think Nathan Cleary is a key part of that. That's a Captain Obvious statement, but he is a key part of. He is the key part of it.
Yeah, the big cog in that engine.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, the Melbourne's got some big guns in their team that I think will be able to deliver a win. And you know what? It's going to emphasise once more the closeness of the competition this year, where you're going to see, as we've talked about before, more losses from a minor Premier team than we've had for some time. So I'm tipping the Storm in that one. I'll take them 1-12. I think it'll probably be like a 10 or 12 point victory for them there.
Yeah, I mean, these are the sort of games where we see Cameron Munster invariably come up for big play. I already mentioned Nelson of Sofa Solomona. As much as he's a grub, he's having a very good season as an attacking forward. I will go for the Panthers here, though, by a converted try or less. This is going to be an absolute, slobber knocker to, really informed teams that are largely healthy outside of their Nathan Cleary absence. I think this will be a very good game.
Well said, JR.
And on to Super Saturday, where we've got 3 games kicking off first at 3:00 p.m. as the Canberra Raiders host the Gold Coast Titans. 6v9 here, so some important ladder implications. Also, probably for the Parramatta Eels too, as we sort of are floating in that vicinity right now. For this game, though, this is a chance for, on the overs under 60s, this could be like a 60-point, 70-point sort of a combined score game here.
Yeah, you don't trust the defence on either team there. The Raiders, I don't know, their last win just felt strange. It was just an odd one. And the Titans,
they're coming off the upset against the Broncos. They're going to be flying high. Interim coach, whose name eludes me right now, so no disrespect there, but did a good job getting them up for that. But can they maintain the rage? And oftentimes these teams don't. But we always say of the Titans, it's not for a lack of talent. AJ Brimson's playing for a berth in Origin to replace Reece Walsh. We already mentioned Khan Pereira, the electric winger. You got Kelly, Shop, Sami. You got plenty of time for Philip Sami. He's a very good outside back. Foran and Boyd in the halves. I mean, that's a good back line. And in the forwards, Mo Fotuaika, Tino Fa'asuamala Awi. Sam Verrills is a good dummy half when healthy, and he is healthy right now. Dave Fafita's an absolute weapon in the back row. So they got the strike, but have they got the concentration?
Well, they've got the strike. If there's a team that you'd compare to the Warriors in terms of inconsistency, capability versus inconsistency, the Titans are probably the Australian equivalent of the Warriors team. So I don't know which Titans team's going to turn up.
And for the Raiders,
their coach, is it Lenahan, something like that?
Yeah, maybe that might be a bit more accurate than my effort. But for the Raiders, I mean, Jack Whiten, he's looking good. Jamal Fogarty, it's a bit of a revenge game for him, given he came to the Raiders by way of the Titans. But the forward pack is a little bit lighter for the Raiders this week with no Josh Papali'i. Sorry, Josh. But on the flip side, Corey Horsburgh, much like the fullback on the other side, AJ Brimson, they're both looking for Origin berth, so he's going to be up for a big game here. One thing that does have me scratch my head with the Canberra team 60s is Nick Cottridge on the interchange. Has Ricky actually been putting him on the field?
I can't recall him getting a run.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, yeah. So I'm just trying to see if I can see his minutes here somewhere. Minutes played 3, 21, 80, 55. So obviously when he started as a winger, he got the 80. But the biggest minutes as an interchange player was in the win against the Rabbitohs. So, yeah, I don't know. That's a bit of a Tim Sheen's approach there, isn't it? Carrying the out-and-out outside back on the interchange. But, yeah, flip a coin here. Home game, home field advantage is always nice. But 3:00 p.m. at Canberra probably negates some of the weather or at least temperature advantages. It could still be brisk, but it won't be truly, truly frigid. So, I don't know. Maybe I'll go with the Titans to back up their win against Brisbane here.
I think being a home game, and I was going to say the same as what you said about the 3:00 kickoff, at least as far as the Titans are concerned, they're not having to play on a Saturday night down in Canberra. It's not going to be warm by any stretch of the imagination. It's probably going to be a temperature that would be equivalent of playing at night in Sydney. But even so, and even for the fact that I think that the Titans have greater strike power in their team than what the Raiders do, I'm going to tip a home team there simply because I can't tip the Titans to go back to back.
I mean, you got me there. You got me dead the rights there. So, yeah, this is the definition of a coin toss game. I've gone Titans, you've gone Raiders. Let's see how that plays out. Which brings us to the 5:30 slot and one of the more improbable rivalries in the modern NRL, I'd say 60s. North Queensland Cowboys taking on the West Tigers 10v16. Cowboys on a tear. Tigers slumping after winning a couple of games in the mid-season. But yeah, this rivalry dates back to 2005 in that grand final. But more recently,
what about the last match?
I was about to say more recently, the drama of that last match where we saw wild scenes on that final kickoff and the inability to challenge, and thus the changes made in the off season to those.
Oh
mechanisms.
no, I'm talking about.
Oh, you mean? Sorry, this match where the West Tigers absolutely paced the Cowboys. Yeah, so
yeah.
Sorry, I was going back to last season there, but you're right. This season where the West Tigers had the real slump buster before I went back to slumping. The 60-plus point win over the Cowboys, one of the most shocking results of the season, no doubt. But yeah, they actually enter as rank outsiders here, over $6 at the head-to-head line here.
Isn't it amazing that the team that only a few short weeks ago, what was it, about 6 weeks?
About that, yeah.
6 weeks? 5-6 weeks ago, they deliver the thumping of all thumpings. Like they got over 60 points, wasn't it?
66, was it?
Yeah.
I'll go back and find this because this is actually worth doing the deep dive on. It was 66-18. Yeah, so
yes.
And that included 54 from 61st minute tries for the Cowboys to make it that much more respectable.
Oh, so to think that it's turned around so badly for the Tigers since then, and obviously the Cowboys have improved in their form, that the Tigers are now $6 outsiders in this match.
Yeah, the Tigers' form line since that game was...
That's wild.
Yeah,
it's absolutely wild.
Well, since that game where they posted a club high record points there, they had bye. That controversial 1 point loss to the Raiders where there was that missed knock on, got beaten handily by the Titans, got handled by the Storm, another bye, and we arrive here. So they're 0-3 since, but they did bank 4 points care of those two byes. So they might have blown their load entirely in that game. The poor buggers.
Yeah, and you've referenced there before what transpired last time they played up in Townsville.
That's right.
Which was like one of the more bizarre endings that you would ever see, let alone, well, I still would suggest that the Tigers were ripped off badly.
I would say that you're pretty bang on there. But in this game, 60s, you got the red-hot Scotty Drinkwater, who is on an absolute tear, and probably one of the big reasons, alongside just their forwards being a bit more direct and sort of willing to take that contact, as to why the Cowboys have been on such a surge. But Valentine Holmes, always a classy player out in the centres. Townsend and Dearden. Dearden is actually an outside chance of origin. If you saw 360, Brafen Astor was being a little bit coy about Cameron Munster being more than happy to play fullback for the Maroons and open the way for someone like Tom Dearden to come into the half. So he's got plenty to play for this week. Reece Robson, obviously he's looking to go back to the New South Wales camp. So yeah, him, Jeremiah Nene, Ruben Cotter. Man, they've actually got a shocking amount of origin reps in this Cowboys team, which is probably why people were so baffled as to why they started the season so slow. For the Tigers, Dream Bull is the real shining light for them this year. Junior Tupou had that red-hot start, including that big game against us. And look at his numbers, but it feels like he hasn't produced many highlight reel plays since. Because that game against us, he went for like 200 metres, 221 metres, and I don't know how many tackle breaks. 8 tackle breaks? Yeah. Oh, he's still been busting tackles, and he's been over 100 metres in every week except for against the Rabbitohs. So he's having a pretty good season still. So they've been the two shining lights in the back line. Dane Laurie and Brandon Wakeham, they're the starting half 60s. No Luke Brooks, no Adam Dwahi, it is dire for the Tigers and the playmaking stakes this week.
Yeah, and that's probably a big part of why they are such outsiders there. The Cowboys, well, they did get the Panthers in a week where I think from memory was that where the Panthers had their Origin players out, and I know the Cowboys had Origin players out.
That's right. Yeah,
that was a strange sort of game, and it was one where the Panthers looked to be in complete control. I'm not entirely convinced yet about the Cowboys' form.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's been things that have bounced their way, especially in that Panthers game. I don't think you can take the form out of that. I mean, it looks great. They've beaten the Storm, the Panthers, the Rabbitohs over those weeks. They've also struck them, I believe, at the right time. And there's a couple of blokes that have played outstanding. I think you won't get any idea out of this game either, because the Tigers, as you said, they're down in troops, and they can't afford to be down in troops. It's going to be a cakewalk for the Cowboys, and I would suggest they will be in the sort of mood with a team that humiliated them last time, that they will be looking to well and truly return the favour. I think it will be a ruthless beating, and I'm going to suggest that the Cowboys will go beyond 50 points in this game.
Yeah, I'm predicting a pretty healthy win for the Cowboys. I'm going to go a little bit more circumspect, probably in the range of like 20 to 30 points plus. But yeah, they've got all their Origin stars in this week. They're going to be fired up for that redemption. So I don't think you're too far off the pace maybe as to what the upper sort of bracket of points scored could be, which brings us to the final game of Super Saturday. And this one is that Brisbane derby we mentioned earlier. The second place Broncos hosting the 11th place Dolphins, who the Eels gave that first half thrashing to. This one's taking place at the Gabba as per that Football World Cup sort of relocation of the rugby league teams. And for this one, the Broncos got, what have they got going in here? It's like a lot of ins, but they're in the extended roster. So they've got a lot of ins, but it's like not the actual starting team. Whereas for the Cowboys, they get Jeremy Marshall-King back in this week, which is really nice. He's been very good for them at dummy half. Tessie New comes back in on the wing. And Hamiso Tabuai-Fidow named at fullback. There's been a lot of talk this week about him moving into the centres 60s, given he's been in strong form there at the rep level. And watching what he did to us on the weekend, where he was like their lone bright spot, I'm a little bit, left head scratching here. It feels like you're shuffling deck chairs here or doing a negative. Maybe they don't like his, or I feel like there's a lack of communication or something from fullback, but in terms of his raw output, he is an absolute strike weapon.
Yeah, he is. Interesting, you've got a couple of those Brisbane forwards that are out. You've now got Reece Walsh, who's out. Normally, I would just be saying straight out that the Broncos are going to do a real number on the Dolphins here. And they may still do a number on the Dolphins because honestly, I think the Dolphins have a very weak roster. I believe that at the start of the season, I was eating humble pie with some of the results that they were getting, but the reality's kicked in now. They'll be, they might pick up a couple of wins before the end of the season, but they're not going to play finals football. They won't go close to finals football. But yeah, as I said, there's an element of the unknown with a couple of those players out for Brisbane. The inclusion of Jeremy Marshall-King is a big one for mine for the Dolphins. Have they got an upset win in them? Maybe. Like I don't think they're going to produce consistent football before the end of the season. I'll still tip Brisbane. I'll tip Brisbane 1-12 in this one. but I think we might see a little bit of improvement from the Dolphins, given that it's the local derby, given that you've got Jeremy Marshall-King back, given that you've got Reece Walsh out. So I think those factors make it a bit closer, but the Broncos still win.
Yeah, a lot of the Broncos' best football has been run through with Reece Walsh, and that's not to do a disservice to Adam Reynolds and Ezra Mam, who have both been very good. But you could see that curtailing some of their ability to pile on points. I think that the Dolphins will keep it close through the first half, but I see the Broncos probably getting away from this and in the win in sort of the vicinity of 12 to 18 points at the end. So I'm going to tip the Broncos to win solidly here. And that brings us to Sunday, where we've got a couple of games to play. Neither of them are particularly highly seeded games. So this might be one for or two for the purists here, with the 15th place Bulldogs and the 14th place Newcastle Knights kicking off the action at 2 o'clock p.m. This one's out at Accor Stadium, or Olympic Park, as some people prefer to call it. And yeah, both these teams, they're struggling. There's no way to sugarcoat this. The Dogs, we hear it, we've heard it every year for about half a decade now about how this is the year they're going to make the big push and be finals contenders, and it's fallen apart again. And meanwhile, for the Sharks, they've sort of lurched from promising win to really bad loss to, thereabouts. Adam O'Brien is a man that is under a lot of pressure, and he insists that he is the right man to lead the Knights, but he needs these results. And looking at this, both teams have a whole stack of ins. So I don't know what that meant from last week. If these are all proper ins or guys being shuffled around, but they've got Josh Adokar, Matt Burton, Raymond Fatala Mariner, and Ryan Sutton as the highlight ins for the Bulldogs. On the other side, you've got Lockie Miller and Lachlan Fitzgibbon, a pair of Lachlins there, probably as the big ins for the Knights. Are they actually in the team, though? No, they're not. So Miller isn't, Fitzgibbon is. So, yeah, on paper, I don't know what to make of this 160s. Kalen Ponga, a lot of talk about him being maybe a recalled Origin, but he stood himself down, and I believe he's going to stay that way. So his availability will be, well, he wouldn't be unavailable for this game, but does that light a fire for him that they want him back? I don't know. You think that Newcastle had the advantage in the head-to-head fullback stakes there, Perrin versus Ponga, but the Dogs' backline's pretty handy. And they've actually moved Khalid Rajab into the starting halves. And Rajab was probably their best player against us 60s. He was one of the few players to actually spark something close to a consistent playmaking threat in that game. And what have I done with Carl Lawapu then? Is he on the interchange or has he just been dropped? Where is he? I can't see him in this team. So maybe he's been... Yeah, he's out. So I don't know if he's hurt or got dropped, the young rookie sensation. But yeah, I don't know what to make of this game. Dogs, the home team here. Maybe that's enough to get them over the line, but this could be a real dour affair.
Hang on, I'm just tossing a coin here.
Yeah, that's it, mate. That's it.
In all honesty, I'm looking at the teams. I think you've got, obviously with respect to blokes who are first grade footballers and a couple there that have played representative football, it's still on the whole two very average packs that are lining up against each other. I don't know who gets on top there. Like in all honesty, you've got the Dogs who really, as far as the media are concerned, they've flown under the radar in terms of criticism.
Yep.
Like they genuinely have. I mean, if Parramatta were performing like the Dogs have this year, they'd be wanting to tear them to pieces and call for the sacking of the coach and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, this is Serraldo's first year with the Bulldogs, but there was a lot that was expected of them, as you suggested, as there has been in previous years. It casts a light, doesn't it, when you have a coach that they paid a lot of money for a long-term coaching deal, spent a lot of money on bringing players in, and that the results aren't really too much better than the coaches who were there before, who had probably less resources than what the Dogs are pumping into the team this year for him, and weaker rosters than the current roster. and they were thrown onto the scrap heap, those coaches. Now, Ciraldo may turn out to be a fine NRL coach, but it does put it into perspective, doesn't it, about the previous coaches and what they were asked to do with significantly weaker rosters and resources. So, look, yeah, honestly, I don't know. The Knights are favourite in this. I don't know how that's determined, especially given that the Knights lost to a weakened Penrith team last
in terms
week.
of pure strike, when I look at these two teams, I look at Kalen Ponga, Dom Young, Bradman Best, Greg Marju. You know, they've got some real good weapons in the back line. The problem is for the Knights is they can't feature them consistently. So if they can get those guys in the right spots, they'll score tries.
If they get beaten this week, the Knights, I know that there's already drums that are beating now around Adam O'Brien. You could imagine that you would have some management that starts to become receptive to those drums because things aren't really changing too much up there. And when you look ahead, is it going to be any better next year at this stage?
No. Yeah.
No.
And like we always say, the NRL is ruthless. It's a results-driven business, and they've given Adam O'Brien a pretty, lengthy piece of rope to do his work with. You know, they haven't, short-leashed him by any means, and he just hasn't been able to turn the place around, at least up until now. So he really needs a good run. Like, he needs win on win on win to, install a bit of confidence and a bit of breathing room here. And that means he's got to get the job done on Sunday. And I'm actually going to tip the Knights here. This is a terrible game to tip, but I will go for Newcastle. I'm
actually going to tip the Dogs in a match that I couldn't care less who wins.
I'll put it, maybe I won't put it on depending on what our time frame is, but if I can watch it, I will have it on the background, but I wouldn't be too interested in the actual outcome. And then the final game of the round, they've been in the headlines for their signing flurry this week, but the Brooksvale Sea Eagles taking on the Sydney Roosters. It's 13 versus 12. This one is out at Four Pines Park, aka Brookvale Stadium. With the two teams, they're struggling. The host of injuries for the Sea Eagles. The Roosters, they've also got a host of injuries this week, but they do get Swali'i back this week. But they're in all sorts. Their captain and fullback's in shocking form. I don't know. I was talking to my brother about this. Do you reckon Teddy's carrying an injury that he's not disclosing? Because he just doesn't look like the same player. Like, it's not surprising to see a decline in his form, but just to see it so catastrophically fail the way we have this year, I don't know. He just looks like a shadow of himself.
Yeah, he does. And look, that's one of those things, isn't it? When players don't disclose injuries for obvious reasons, but the form is just so drastically different, so down on previous efforts that there's something going on. And you said something to me the other day about I think you made a comparison from memory. You can correct me if I'm wrong, about that Teddy was almost doing a similar thing to Paul Gallen in that his involvement in the plays for New South Wales was stifling the attack.
Yeah.
And I know they're vastly different positions, but I looked at it and I even looked at it with regard to the Roosters, and I thought, you know what, you're right. The number of times where he seemed to be caught or where the play would break down around him, whereas he was always the spark. There's nothing about him that sparks right now. There might be the odd moment where you think, there's Teddy, but for the most part, he's playing very, very average football. And look, it's hard to say. You in the middle of an Origin series, are you going to come out and sack your captain of your Origin team? No, that just doesn't happen. The only way that he doesn't play Origin is if he steps down, and he's probably got too much pride to step down from there, and really would want to turn his form around as best he can. But if he's got an injury, that's going to make it that much harder. And we're just speculating that there might be some sort of injury that's curtailing his ability to play to his best. But I look at this and I go, you know what? On paper, the Roosters back line is the outside backs have probably got a slight edge in terms of ability at their best, right? Then I look at the halves and I go, well, Daly Cherry Evans is,
even in his advanced years, is just classes and classes above what's there. Because Luke Keary, unfortunately, his form is curtailed on the back of years of concussions and head knocks, and maybe just slowing up a fraction too. And Sandon Smith, well, you got to respect the effort he's putting into his position, into the role he's being cast into, but he's not in DCE's same postcode. And that's so big. We just know the influence that guys like DCE and Moses and Cleary have on these teams. And for the Roosters, it honestly feels like they've just got to find a way to get Joey Manu engaged and featured as much as possible. And it took him a long time last week to get him involved in that game. And the moment they did, he had a huge involvement. He scored a couple of tries and just looked super threatening every time he got the ball. So they've got to keep him constantly engaged. And maybe Swaliti being included can help too. Gives you an easy sort of kick target on that right wing where I presume he'll play alongside Tupou on the left. But, yeah, I mean, Manly get a pair of Trbojeviches in, probably not the ones they want to see in terms of the highest tier of talent, but Jake's a good, honest player. Ben's a young back rower. They get Brad Parker, Jason Saab, and Kelma Talangi back as well. So they've got some big ins to go against their outs. Roosters, no Crichton, no Egan Butcher. They get Nat back instead. No Satili Tupanua. So, yeah, their forward pack's doing it tough. Nathan Brown moves into starting lock forward. Victor Radley's on the edge this week. So that tells you where they're at with their forward pack.
This would be a time you'd love to play the Roosters. We played them at the start of the season where they played a game out of the box
out of the bye. That was Swaliti's best game of the season. They got us, and I am still really frustrated that Will Penasini Symbian, because at that moment I could cop it. I could say I actually said I am okay with that decision, but we've seen it about 3, 4, 5 times since where offside players on the try line get involved in a potential try scoring opportunity, and it's just been a 6 again infringement. And the Eels got done with a Symbian, so really, really ticked off about that. I think that Manly with the reinforcements with DC at the helm, I think they're going to win this one and maybe win pretty healthily.
Yeah, if they get the points here, and I'm going to agree with you, I think Manly do win in this game, despite being down in troops. I'd have to say, this is going to sound a harsh thing to say, but Ruben Garrick at fullback is better than a half fit.
Oh no,
Tom Trbojevic.
No doubt. And again, talking to you, talking to my brother, talking to the people in my sort of inner sphere of rugby league chatting, I've always been mind blown that Manly have been so almost blasé about playing Tom Trbojevic. He needs a good, honest, almost full year of recovery, and you've got a competent, deputy in Ruben Garrick. So just bite the bit, swallow the pill, and put him there and let Tom get right, because in the long term it's going to be better off for it. But yeah, like you said, Ruben Garrick much better than a hobbled Tommy, and he's actually had some games where he's really piled on the points at fullback. So I think he'll be a big feature on the scoring sheet this weekend.
Yeah, and when they defeat the Roosters, this is going to put the Roosters in a very uncomfortable position. Their confidence wouldn't be sky high. We spoke about them on the news podcast just around the rumours. I don't believe rumours stuff. I just think that they are down in form, down in confidence, down in troops. It is the classic mid-season slump. Whether they get out of it and it just ends up a slide similar to what the Broncos went through last year is another matter. They are obviously in need of a roster clean out. Some of their big name players like Tedesco maybe are in need of a rest. It might be the sort of season where they can ride off. And yet, didn't they start the season as one of the premiership favourites?
They were, because of it feels like whenever they have a bad season, everyone in terms of the media is like, yeah, they had a lot of injuries, so next year they're going to be way better. And we've had this cycle a few years in a row now, and I think the reality is that they've just been on a downward trajectory across a number of seasons, and they're really crowded out this year. And I don't think there's immediate pressure on Trent Robinson, but if they have a truly terrible end to this season, you'd imagine that another ordinary season next year might turn the screws a bit. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out and whether they can do a bit of a recovery job.
Yeah, and, to be fair, I think if anything ever transpired around Trent Robinson, like if he wasn't wanted by the Roosters, I think he's the sort of coach where another club would snap him up.
He'd have a
very
hot market,
quickly.
so it'd be one of those. Yeah, they wouldn't make the decision lightly. He'd have to be truly, struggling, because I think the amount of goodwill that he has banked on the back of those premierships and just being a highly competitive team for years. Yeah, it'd take a really bad season this year into a bad season next year to even start the discussion.
Yeah. So we're both going for the Seagulls in that one.
Yeah, it feels dirty to say it, but yes, I think Manly are the team to beat in this particular fixture.
Yeah, it does. You're right. I can. Yeah, I'm feeling very uncomfortable about it.
Might go take the old shower. Yeah.
Well, mate, that brings us to an unusual preview episode of the Tip Sheet, in that we've gone into great depth in looking at the NRL round and coming up with our winners. Might be something that we do briefly in future podcasts, as well as the super in-depth coverage of all three grades of Parramatta football. But for now, again, our thanks to our sponsors, that being Big Swing Golf Northmead and Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta. Thank you for your support there. Also, looking forward to next week, where our instant reaction podcast returns to the home of the Eels, Parramatta Leagues Club. And again, we thank our partnership with Parramatta Leagues Club for hosting, allowing us to host the Tip Sheet podcast in Jack's Bar and Grill, where you can get a good feed, a drink, and listen to plenty of Parramatta Eels talk on match days. So, mate, thank you for today's episode. Thank you to the listeners for tuning in. If you're listening to this on YouTube, please subscribe. It helps with all the metrics and helps to grow our content there. And as I mentioned before, we are looking to grow our YouTube presence. So get on there, subscribe. Thank you, everyone, and go you mighty Eels.